Hey guys, we got one last quiz. Then you'll need to turn in your notebook by the end of today for full credit, but you can turn it in late for most credit, either Friday or early next week, basically until Tuesday. After that, it's basically a zero. All right, so let's get started on this study guide. Now, there's not a whole lot to the digestive unit, so it's a little bit of memorization. You should be okay. I don't expect a lot of bad grades on this. This diagram up here is a little confusing. We do have multiple salivary glands. Okay, so C is salivary gland, but if it was pointing to this structure up here, that would be as well. Let's go down our list. Tongue. Tongue is actually going to be B. If you think about it, the tongue is a fairly large muscle, and then this is your mouth, this little opening right here in the gray. So B is actually the tongue. And what is the function of the tongue? Well, it helps mechanical digestion. If you can imagine, the tongue kind of moves stuff around in the mouth to make sure it gets to the teeth to where it needs to be grinded up. So that's mechanical digestion. The pharynx is just a common passageway in the back of the throat. So food would go mouth, pharynx, esophagus, stomach. Salivary glands, those are going to help. They have digestive enzymes in it, salivary amylase in there to help digest starch. And they just allow the food to go down the esophagus better. Without the saliva, obviously, food's going to get stuck in the esophagus. Esophagus, there's nothing special about the esophagus. It's just a food tube. Doesn't produce any digestive enzymes. Liver. The liver is not directly part of the digestive tube, but it does produce digestive enzymes and produces bile. Those are going to be important things you need to know. Stomach. It's a temporary holding cell. It does produce its own digestive enzymes. The gallbladder. Gallbladder is this little guy right here, F. Gallbladder does not make bile. Remember, that happens in the liver. The gallbladder stores it and injects it into the small intestine. If you haven't picked this up so far, your food goes stomach, small intestine, then large intestine. That makes sense because large intestine is your colon. That's where your poop's stored. Pancreas. Pancreas does stuff outside the digestive system, but it produces digestive enzymes, and I think it produces quite a bit of variation in digestive enzymes. So you can't live without it. Ascending colon, that's interesting. So yeah, G is the ascending colon, but it's all part of the colon. Appendix, this little guy right here. If you didn't pick up on the bell work, the appendix does have a function. It kind of hides good bacteria, and you can see its location is right here between the small and large intestine. So it can recolonize kind of both if you lose all of your gut bacteria for some reason. Antibiotics, diarrhea, something like that. Small intestine, obviously it's in here. That's where all your digestion occurs, except for the very first part, the duodenum, the first part of the small intestine. It's about the first foot. It'd be right up in here, kind of underneath the liver right here, running behind the large intestine. So that is where more digestion occurs. So most of the small intestine is absorption, but the first part is kind of just additional area for digestive enzymes to kind of come together and digest that food. Rectum, their external sphincter, what's its job? Well, that's your voluntary control muscle, keep you from pooping on yourself. All right. Diarrhea, if the water is not properly absorbed in the colon or large intestine, you're going to have diarrhea. Lower esophageal sphincter, so we can't see that in this image, but there's a little sphincter right in here that holds food in the stomach. Oh, actually, lower esophageal will be up here. My bad. You have pyloric and lower esophageal, so let's talk about both of them. This is your LES, lower esophageal sphincter. That's going to keep food from coming back up. You got to imagine, we're not always standing upright, so if we're laying down or something like that, food is naturally going to want to go, this pin sucks. Food's naturally want to go back up our esophagus, and the LES will prevent that. Structure there prevents food entering the respiratory tract when it allows you to swallow. Epiglottis, that's kind of the last unit. So the epiglottis on that one. Peristalsis, so this is one we need to talk about. So I have my food tube of science, that was Bill Nye. All right, so what is peristalsis? It's basically how food is moved, not only through the intestines, but through the esophagus as well, and to a lesser extent through the stomach. So how is food moved? Well, imagine we have food or poop or something we're trying to move through the intestines. It's going to be a rhythmic contraction. So peristalsis is a rhythmic contraction that moves stuff through the digestive system. So how does it work? Well, imagine there's food here. It would contract here, push it down. Then it would contract here, push it down. Then it would contract here, push it down. Then it would contract here, and so forth. And the muscles in front of that thing you're trying to move need to be completely relaxed. So it just keeps contract, 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 and the food basically is pushed down as those rhythmic contractions happen. Boom, 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 boom. It just keeps pushing stuff down. So that's peristalsis. Small, like finger projections in the small intestine, those are called villi. We did not have a bellwork over those like we usually do. Villi, they kind of look like little cilia, the little hairs on the edge of the cells, and their job is to add surface area. Just like we had little alveoli in the lungs, you have villi in your small intestines to increase surface area. So what is the purpose? To increase surface area. Now, why would we want more surface area in the small intestines? Well, more surface area means more capillaries, which means more absorption of those nutrients into your bloodstream. If we didn't have those villi, your intestines would have to be longer, and they're already pretty long. You can look at pepsin from the saliva lab. We didn't do a saliva lab, but we will talk about this. Well, we did in class. Basically, you have salivary amylase. I'm sure I didn't spell that right, but you have salivary amylase is an enzyme in spit, saliva. They convert starches to glucose. So we talked about where does chemical digestion start? Well, in your mouth. Not everybody has salivary amylase, but most people do. Missing the enzyme lactase would cause what? Lactose intolerance. Basically, if you miss any enzyme, you can't digest that certain protein or sugar. Why is the majority of the world lactose intolerant? Ooh, this is a good question. So it has to do with the fact that most of our, we all start out producing lactose because breast milk has lactose in it. But most of us, we're not breastfeeding, obviously, into adulthood. So most humans lose their ability to produce lactose. But Western Europeans have a mutation because we used to domesticate cows. Our ancestors would have domesticated cows. If your ancestors are Western European, you would still have the ability to produce lactose or lactate, later in life. Okay, so why is the majority of the world lactose intolerant? Because their ancestors didn't domesticate and drink breast milk later in life. You can look that up. We talked about this. 3 parts of the small intestine. Duodenum. Ooh, that one got me. I don't want to tell you wrong on this. Duodenum, ileum, jejunum. Don't worry, guys. Mr. Cox is on the ball here. So the one you definitely need to know is the duodenum, because that's kind of the special part where extra digestion occurs, and the acid from the stomach gets neutralized in the duodenum as well. Okay. I'll even spell these right for you. So it goes duodenum, spelled duodenum, sometimes pronounced that way too. And then it's jejunum. And then ileum is the last part. And then that would flow into the ascending colon or the cecum, or just the large intestine. First for the small intestine, duodenum. The majority of the length of the small intestine is for absorption, not digestion. Remember, 2 things have to happen for our food. We have to digest and absorb. Yellow-greenish acid, bile. Sphincter valve between the stomach and the small intestine. So you have another sphincter down here. So this is called the lower esophageal sphincter. This is called the pyloric. You'll need to know both of those sphincters for class. So what's the difference? Well, this one keeps food from coming back to the esophagus. The pyloric holds food in the stomach long enough for it to digest. We don't want the food to immediately go into the small intestine because some digestion, especially of proteins, has to occur in the stomach. Good question. So what is that? That's 25 is pyloric. What is an ulcer? Should be able to look that up, and you should have done an assignment over that. What is sugar from? Why does sugar from fruit take longer to digest than sugar from drinks? That's a great question. So a lot of times, sugar is kind of this evil thing, right? But theoretically, there are some natural sugars that aren't that bad for you. So what's the difference? Well, this sugar is not empty calories. This Coke's going to be digested immediately, especially if it's just drank by itself. But this sugar with the fruit has additional vitamins and nutrients. But here's the important part. There's also fiber in fruit. That's going to slow down the absorption, and that's going to reduce that blood sugar spike. That's going to reduce that chance of you becoming insulin resistant or getting type 2 diabetes. So sugar by itself is extremely dangerous because your body has to have this massive, quick response to it, which can lead to insulin resistance. What takes longest to digest? Carbohydrates, proteins, fats. Y'all should be able to handle that one. Food poisoning. Y'all should be able to handle that one. What does a good bacteria in our intestines do? Well, they help us digest food that we can't do ourselves. We can only make a certain amount of digestive enzymes, but they'll take care of the rest of it for us. And everybody's good bacteria is different based on the type of food they eat. That's why, if you decide to go vegan, all of a sudden you'll start having really bad diarrhea because you don't have the gut bacteria to process all that plant matter. But if you keep up with that, eventually you will develop that. How are weight loss surgeries affected? Well, we did it. You should have done it, Simon. But basically, they do two things. They either prevent how much you can eat, prevent how much you can digest, or prevent your feeling of hunger. They all kind of limit your feeling of hunger. Okay, go back and definitely do that. Those are kind of cool. Those actually work, unlike the weight loss pills. Why is weight loss extremely difficult for obese people? So this is interesting. A lot of times people are like, well, just put down the fork and you'll lose weight. Well, the body has evolved to always be hungry, always be searching for calories. And here's the reason for that. Winter months, you don't get as much food, and so you will burn that fat off in the winter months because that's not the growing season, right? And then in the spring, it's growing season. You kind of put that weight back on throughout the summer, and then you go through the winter months again. Well, we don't have winter months in developed countries, so why is it so hard? Because anytime you stop intaking calories, your body will immediately send out this massive hormonal response. Not only does your stomach do this, but your fat cells will do this as well as they start to shrink. So why is it so difficult for people to lose weight? Because if they do, their body sends a massive hormonal response that says they are starving to death. Are they actually starving to death? No, they have plenty of nutrients, plenty of calories, but the body is lying to them. So for some morbidly obese people to lose weight, it would take a superhuman amount of strength to do that. So sometimes these surgeries do help, but it still takes a lifestyle change. And obviously any weight loss pills that you get offline are completely bogus. I hope you read that article. That's a really good one. It talks about workout supplements too. Some of those are legit. Most of those are also not effective. All right, guys, good luck on the test, and I'm looking forward to those notebooks.